A few years ago, I tried my hand at a scripted commentary series featuring Space Quest 4. If you haven't seen part 3 of the ShadyParadox Files yet, maybe you should watch that one first because the topics in that video are especially pertinent to the Space Quest 4 project. Unfortunately, the Space Quest 4 project never really got off the ground and fizzled out after just 3 episodes. So what happened? Well, that's the topic of today's video, so let me start from the beginning. Space Quest is a classic point-and-click comedy adventure series made by Sierra. Although perhaps not quite as well known as King's Quest or Leisure Suit Larry, it was made alongside them during the company's golden years. I've made it no secret that I'm a fan of Space Quest. I've always peppered little references to it in my videos, from playing the theme in the Myst spaceship to showing flashbacks to a Space Quest 1 playthrough that doesn't actually exist. It's a nice little personal meme I'd like to continue in future material. But still, why Space Quest 4 of all games? Why would I forego more obvious choices like Riven, which is in my top 5 games, in favor of the Space Quest series, which is not? Well, first of all, notice the 2 games I did finish scripted series for, RealMyst and Myst 3, aren't on that list either. So the game alone isn't the only factor when I look at each option. Rather, I try to visualize the end product itself to determine whether I can make my own derivative work that's actually worth the effort. A great example to illustrate this point is Curse of Monkey Island, which is a comedy game in my top 5. That means yes, I do believe Monkey Island 3 is a better game than Space Quest 4, no offense to the Space Quest historian. But I can't imagine myself ever making scripted commentary videos for this game, because I can't think of any way to design them where my character isn't constantly the weak link. There are plenty of issues, but the biggest problem is the dialogue trees. These would inevitably bog my character down into a role of just passively clicking options like any other gamer. The variety in dialogue means all the best jokes are already in the game, and even worse, many dialogue menus only allow one pick to be made, so a single run doesn't show very much. That doesn't mean you'll never see me play the game, of course. As I explained in part 2, if I can't think of a good way to script out optimal gameplay commentary, I'd rather go to the opposite extreme and just do it live. In fact, I live-streamed this game last year. So, shill alert, you should be following my Twitch account and second YouTube channel if you don't want to miss this stuff. Anyway, by contrast, I find Space Quest 4's format is amenable to having a decent gamer character inserted throughout the gameplay. There are multiple reasons for this. Having more commands to interact with the environment really helps, as does the fact there are no long dialogue trees. That way, the character's motives and commentary are more interwoven with the protagonist and the rest of the game. But perhaps more significant are the deaths. You see, Space Quest is notorious for all the brutal ways Roger can meet his demise. I'm not talking about dead ends or anything to do with the gameplay. I mean the ways he bites the dust tend to cause his thorough evisceration. Unfortunately, that means once you restore your game, it no longer exists in Roger's timeline, so he forgets all about it, as will the narrator or any other in-game character. But my gamer character is going to remember every single one of these, so he's effectively going on a separate parallel adventure and thus adding a different perspective. Meanwhile, Curse of Monkey Island doesn't have any deaths, so this parallel adventure wouldn't exist. So it's important that I consider not just what game I'm playing, but how much potential the videos actually have. It's the same reasoning I talked about in the last video that led me to the highly ambitious double-run solution for Riven as the only format I'm really taking seriously for that game. As a rule, the only way I'll consider covering any game is if I can think of a format that gives me enough room for me to be creative and original. Okay, now let's talk about my Space Quest 4 project. In the beginning, I decided it would be fun to announce the project with a short teaser, which showed an excerpt from later in the project that didn't actually exist yet. So I had to design the teaser from 2 different angles. I wanted to make a scene that would grab your immediate attention and offer a decent preview of the project, but I also wanted to create an actual scene that would eventually appear in the project itself, because that in turn would create its own aha moment for the viewer down the road. Here's how the teaser started. Oh yeah, let's try in here again. Maybe we won't get kicked out this time.
Yeah.
Oh, the sign is back here, behind the counter. How was I supposed to know?
This is just one of over 2.
This is the perfect start for something with absolutely no context. But the thing is, this was going to be a real moment in the full project too, because you actually do get kicked out if you try to enter the restaurant before getting your pants replaced.
No shirt.
Although I hadn't worked out all the details in the surrounding timeline, I was pretty confident everything in the teaser would fit right into the flow once I got to it. Then I began the project itself. I showed in part 3 how I set up a lot of targets to try to hit all at the same time, rendering the design a complex puzzle of its own. The constraints I showed in that video already forced the series into a tight script, but there were also a few additional goals I didn't mention that I had to meet for each individual video. I wanted each one to be about 20 to 25 minutes, it would always end with some type of game over screen, and it would feature one homework problem somewhere in the middle. Ah, the homework. I really liked this idea, but it probably was a mistake. The motivation behind it was to encourage comments and participation without resorting to the standard formula.
So if you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
Don't get me wrong. Of course I want people to do all that stuff as much as anyone does. I would just really rather not break out a character and disrupt the whole experience just to sound like everybody else on YouTube. But now I understand why they do it. It's the only thing that works. I wanted to believe I could be more creative with this instead. My idea was to ask the audience a single question in each video for them to then comment on, and that question would be asked at whatever point in the video the subject came up. The problem, of course, was that people would forget the question by the time they got to the end, and of course there was no shilling for liking, subscribing, and so forth either. The question in the second video really highlights the issue. It asked to reduce the fraction for my current score. It does reduce a bunch, so that seems like the point of the question. But the joke was that the score was fake. I had just picked up the unstable ordnance, so the score was doomed to drop back down again once I put it back. It seemed clever to me, but the joke was probably too subtle without explaining it. And it's just a math problem, so only one person needs to answer it anyway. So in the end, the homework experiment failed. It's hard to come up with one good question for every video, so why bother? Especially when it wasn't accomplishing what it was supposed to anyway. So if I do bring the series back, these are likely gone. But what caused the project as a whole to flame out the way it did? Well, you just have to know what was going on at the time and it becomes obvious. By 2014, my channel was already starting to look like a ghost town because my life had become too busy to really focus on it. On top of that, it was a rough year in my personal life, so I wasn't really inspired to work on anything anyway. When things began to turn around for me at the start of 2015, I got the itch to make content once again. And to an extent, I wanted to make up for lost time. So, I overcompensated, and in so doing, I completely botched the comeback. I attempted to do 3 projects at once, which now I know was a really stupid thing to do. One of these was Project Red Pants, which was a really cool giant project I was working on behind the scenes. However, for reasons outside the scope of this video, Red Pants is something that cannot be released in segments, so I wanted to work on something public simultaneously. I settled on 2 things. One was the RealMyst Fly Mode project, and I already explained in part 4 how I underestimated that one. And the other was the Space Quest 4 project, which also got bogged down, particularly on the production side. So I not only took on too many projects at once, but each one turned out to be a bigger deal than I envisioned. It was like expecting to carry one box that weighed 20 pounds, but ending up trying to carry 3 boxes at once that weighed 100 pounds each. So this project never had my full attention, or even nearly what, say, the Exile project had. And when I did find the time for Space Quest 4, I wasted it on screwing up the production workflow. So let's get into that now. Not only was every step of production like pulling teeth, but all too often I ended up pulling the same tooth multiple times. If production begins before design is fully fleshed out, you may end up redoing production over and over as the design keeps changing. I said in part 3 that this burned me on a couple projects, and yeah, this one was a doozy. I did way too much production between design iterations. Now, if production for this project was easy, then maybe I could get away with it. But that was not the case. Production for this project absolutely killed me, and I made mistakes that only compounded the problem, so this is the main thing I chalk up the project's collapse to. I can identify 3 production items in particular that were a constant pain. One was scaling up the original resolution of the game into an HD video. The editor doesn't have a nearest neighbor algorithm, so you have to do it manually. For certain VGA games, like Space Quest 4, You also have to remember to correct the aspect ratio at the same time. But I didn't have a good way to handle these intermediate files at the higher resolution, so I had to try to do as much editing as I could at the original size first. But since I couldn't do everything at that size, the process I was ultimately forced into became much more cumbersome. The second challenge was something I should have anticipated but instead got completely blindsided by. These were the sprites that move across multiple screens. For example, in the streets of Xenon, the zombie moves in a particular U-shaped pattern across the board, and the game keeps track of where it is the whole time you're in that region. The moving sprites have rather severe implications for both design and production. For design, how do you write a script if you don't know where one of these sprites will be when you need it? Or what if it gets in the way when you don't need it? On the production side, game capture is more difficult, as it now requires more precise timing. Again, this is also on top of everything I made in that diagram in part 3. But hey, if I'm already juggling 10 pins at once here, what difference is one more? Jeez. I was really naive when I started this project because I figured once I got past that zombie, then I wouldn't need to worry about this type of thing anymore. Of course, I forgot that every region in the game has some sprite doing this. Sometimes two. Part of the reason I stalled out while making part 4 of the project was I wanted the slime to run horizontally at Roger in the sewers, but I could only get this to happen in the floppy version. I somehow did get it to happen one time in the CD version, but of course I wasn't recording and now I can't figure out how I did it. The third challenge was trying to properly edit the music into the videos. See, it's not as simple as it sounds if you want the good music, because that uses the MT32 module, so it's not recorded by the emulator. More importantly, some edits need to be made to the game footage, such as to accommodate those moving sprites, or any other timing purpose. If your music is tied to the footage, you can't make any of these timing edits. So the music is not recorded during game capture. Instead, each track from the game is recorded into one long file and then edited into the video separately. While it's a little tedious, executing this properly isn't too bad, and I don't mind doing it. Unfortunately, the Space Quest 4 project was my learning experience on how not to do it. There's no need to go into exactly what I was doing wrong, but it involved a lot of extra steps and retakes that I wouldn't have had to do if I were smarter back then. So that bogged everything down unnecessarily. All things considered, looking back, in a way it's impressive I was able to finish just those 3 episodes, especially with all the rework that went into it. So if I were to pull this project back off the scrap heap, what steps would I need to take to salvage it? Needless to say, my priority would have to be to establish a much smoother production workflow. Avoiding too many reworks would be a good start. Anything I can do here would help me release the episodes closer together, which is essential for audience retention. Fortunately, there is something I can do with each of those 3 production items to make them more efficient. The pixel scaling is easy, because I've already found a much better way to do it. Now I can upscale everything correctly right at the start without resorting to lossy codecs or giant uncompressed videos. Replacing my old clunky roundabout method should speed things up. It helped when making this video anyway. Then as far as the moving sprites go, I can hedge more toward edits that allow for convenience or entertainment instead of strict adherence to game accuracy like I was. As long as fudging with sprite positions doesn't get too egregious, I don't think most of the audience is that interested in nitpicking. However, while being flexible helps, it won't solve all my problems here. The last issue was the music, and this is one area where I think I can really make a difference. What I should do is record a complete MT32 MIDI library of the game right at the start, and take that part of the process completely out of the picture. Before I was constantly making new recordings at intermediate steps, which was highly disorganized and resulted in a lot of reworks that I now know can be easily avoided. So, am I bringing this project back or not? Well, it's that time again to compare the pros and cons. As I said at the start, the format of this game fosters the right environment for my character and the kind of videos I want to make. I'll admit the execution looks awkward in spots where the script is a little too strict, but I think that's just part of the territory, so I still say it has some of my better material in it. It's been long enough so I can say that, right? However, I'm not surprised it didn't get the attention of my RealMyst and Exile series. It's possible this is simply because it's not as popular a game, although I strongly suspect that's not the only factor. After all, RealMyst started out with similar numbers. The difference is I actually powered through it and posted regular episodes, while the Space Quest episodes were too few and far between. And the reason that happened was that the production was really hard. Although at this point, that basically boils down to the moving sprites problem. So to make a fair comparison to the RealMyst series, I would need to speed up production. This would be a project where I might stack completed episodes for a while before eventually releasing them slowly. If I can smooth out production, then maybe this project should be a go, because Space Quest 4 is not a very long game. I figure the total number of episodes would be in the 15 to 20 range. Of course, I tend to underestimate everything, so who knows. And it would be nice to go back and complete this, because that would mean I'd finish what I started. It felt really good to finish Fly Mode and not just let all the old projects fizzle out, and I'd like the same to happen with this project someday. But I'm not even sure I can say I have truly started on this. In all honesty, if I were to revive it, I would likely start over, at least on the production side. With all the changes in production, including my voice on this new mic, I literally cannot make videos that look and feel like the old ones anymore. So at this point, rather than ruin consistency, I'd prefer to just go back and redo them. I'm not going to revamp this project at all unless I improve production anyway, so if that means it wouldn't take too long, then why not? I would port the design over, so the main difference would be the production quality, but I could tweak the design in spots too if I saw anything. Still, I have to admit, whether I start with episode 1 or episode 4, overall, it doesn't look too good for the Space Quest 4 project at the moment. I might work on pieces of it in the background on occasion, like the music library or a more comprehensive design, but at this point in time, it doesn't seem like the right move to push this one forward as my next big achievement. Alright, I think that covers everything. I'm glad to get this off my chest, so thanks for taking the time to hear me out. It was worth it to at least explain what happened, even if this project doesn't seem to be the right one to pursue right now. I recognize there are other projects better suited to bring the good times back. Still, I hope I do get a chance to return to it someday, since the game does offer a fun context for me to be creative in. So I'll always keep it in mind in case the stars ever align. And that leaves one final project from the past I need to address. That would be the elephant in the room. Or at least the one on my hard drive. I told myself I would never talk about this until I got it done, but circumstances have changed now. Although I haven't worked on it in forever, I've still kept it to myself all these years, so I hope you tune in when I finally discuss it publicly for the first time. See you in part 7.